What if the reason you can't sleep isn't your body, but your mind refusing to let go? Not the noise outside, not the room, not even your phone. Just the thoughts you carry into the night. Because think about it. All day you're busy, distracted, moving. But the moment your head hits the pillow, everything gets louder. The overthinking, the memories, the what-ifs, the things you didn't say, the things you wish you did differently. And suddenly, you're tired, but you can't rest. Now here's the part most people ignore. Sleep isn't just physical, it's psychological. You don't just fall asleep with your body, you fall asleep with your identity, with your beliefs, with the story you've been telling yourself all day. And that story? It doesn't turn off at night. It plays on repeat, quietly shaping how you feel, even while you sleep. Now pause for a second. Have you ever noticed how one negative thought at night can spiral into 10 more? You start with something small, and suddenly you're replaying your entire life at 2 a.m. for no reason. Be honest. Does this feel familiar? Because this is where things start to shift. Because what if, instead of letting your mind control the night, you started guiding it? Gently, quietly, without force. Now here's where it gets interesting. Your brain, right before sleep, is in its most programmable state. Not fully awake, not fully asleep. Just open. And in that state, whatever you repeat, whatever you focus on, whatever you feel, starts to sink deeper. Much deeper than during the day. Which means, those late-night thoughts, they don't just pass, they imprint. They shape how you wake up, how you feel the next day, what you expect from life. And this is where most people unknowingly sabotage themselves. They go to sleep stressed, anxious, overthinking, and then wonder why they wake up feeling the same, or worse. But wait, this is where things begin to change. Because if your mind is absorbing everything at night, what if you could choose what it absorbs? What if instead of fear, you fed it calm? Instead of doubt, you fed it certainty. Instead of chaos, you gave it direction. Now here's the part nobody tells you. You don't need to fight your thoughts at night. You don't need to silence them. You just need to replace them. Softly, consistently, with something better, something intentional. And that's where this changes everything. Because the words you hear, right before you sleep, become the thoughts you wake up with. Not always consciously, but deeply. Now think about this. If every night you told your mind, I'm behind, I'm not enough, I'll never figure this out, what kind of life are you slowly building? But if instead you started feeding it something different, I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm becoming someone stronger, what changes? Not instantly, but inevitably. Now here's a question most people never ask. Why do we protect our mornings, but neglect our nights? We have routines, habits, plans for the day. But the night? We leave it to chance. Scrolling, thinking, drifting into whatever mental state shows up. And that's the gap. Because your night is programming your tomorrow, whether you realize it or not. And this next part, this is where it gets real. Because part of you might be thinking, this sounds nice, but it won't work for me. And that thought? That's the same pattern, the same voice that's been keeping you stuck. Now let me ask you something. Which version of you shows up at night? The one who overthinks everything, or the one who lets go? Don't answer quickly, because that version is shaping your future, every single night. And this next part, this is where everything begins to shift. Because once you understand what your mind is doing before sleep, you realize something powerful. You've been training it without even knowing.
You've been training it every single night without realizing it. Every thought you repeat, every emotion you hold on to, every story you replay in your head. It's practice, not random, practice. And your mind? It gets better at whatever you practice. So if you practice stress, it becomes natural. If you practice overthinking, it becomes automatic. If you practice doubt, it becomes your default. That's the loop. And it doesn't stop when you fall asleep. It continues under the surface. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because if your nights are filled with anxiety, your mind starts expecting anxiety, even when nothing is wrong. You wake up tired, not just physically, but mentally, like you've been running without moving. Sound familiar? Because this is what most people live with and call it normal. But normal isn't always healthy. Now wait, this is where things begin to open up. Because if your mind learns through repetition, it can unlearn the same way. Not overnight, but overnights, slowly, consistently, powerfully. Now think about this. Instead of letting your mind wander, you give it direction. Simple, clear, repetitive. You don't argue with your thoughts. You don't fight them. You just introduce something stronger, something calmer, something intentional. And over time, your mind starts following that instead. Now here's a moment. You're lying in bed. Your thoughts start racing. Old pattern says, "Here we go again." But this time, you pause, you breathe, and you play something different. Words that remind you you're safe, you're okay, you're allowed to rest. And at first, your mind resists. It tries to pull you back. But what about tomorrow? But what if things go wrong? You need to think this through. And this is where most people lose. They listen, they follow, they spiral. But what if, just this once, you didn't? What if you stayed with the new pattern, even when it felt unfamiliar, even when it felt pointless? Because here's the truth. New patterns always feel weak in the beginning. Not because they don't work, but because they're not repeated yet. Now let me ask you something. How many nights have you spent thinking about things you couldn't control, replaying conversations, imagining worst-case scenarios, trying to solve tomorrow at midnight? And did it help? Or did it just drain you? Think about it. Because most people don't realize this. Nighttime thinking isn't clarity. It's distortion. Everything feels bigger, heavier, more urgent than it actually is. And that's why your mind needs guidance, not freedom. Now here's where it shifts again. Because once you start guiding your thoughts at night, your emotions begin to follow. You feel calmer, lighter, less reactive, not instantly, but noticeably. And then something unexpected happens. You start waking up differently. Not with pressure, not with anxiety, but with space, mental space. And that space? It changes how you move through your day, how you respond to stress, how you see yourself. And that's when it hits you. Your nights weren't just about sleep. They were about programming. And you've been programming yourself in the wrong direction. But this next part, this is where it goes deeper. Because even if you start using affirmations, even if you guide your mind, there's something underneath it all that determines whether it actually works. And most people miss it completely. Now here's a question. Why do some people repeat positive things and still don't change? Why does it feel like it works for others, but not for them? Don't answer yet, because the answer changes everything.
Because the truth is, it's not just what you say to your mind. It's what your mind believes about you. That's the real filter, the one most people never see. You can repeat all the affirmations you want. I'm confident, I'm calm, I'm in control. But if deep down you don't believe it, your mind rejects it, quietly, automatically. And that's why it feels like nothing is changing. Now here's where it gets real. Because your subconscious doesn't respond to words. It responds to identity, to what you believe is true about yourself. So if your identity says, "I'm an overthinker," then every calm thought feels fake. If your identity says, "I'm always stressed," then peace feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. And this is the hidden resistance, not your effort, not your discipline, your self-image. Now pause for a second. What do you actually believe about yourself when no one is watching? Not what you say out loud, not what you wish were true. What you feel is true. Because that belief is shaping everything, even your sleep. Be honest. Does this hit a little? Because this is the part most people avoid, but it's also the part that changes everything. Now here's where things start to shift. Because you don't need to force belief. You build it, slowly, through repetition, through emotional connection, through consistency. Not just saying something, but feeling it, even a little, even for a moment. Now imagine this. You're lying in bed again, same situation, same silence. But this time, you don't try to convince yourself of something huge. You start small. I'm okay right now. I can let go, just for tonight. I don't need to solve everything. And something softens, just a little. That's enough. Because change doesn't start with certainty. It starts with possibility. Now here's the shift. Instead of trying to become a completely different person overnight, you start becoming someone who is slightly more at peace, slightly more in control, slightly less reactive. And over time, those slight changes stack. They compound. They become your new normal. Now here's something most people won't admit. They want change, but they're attached to their old identity. They keep telling the same story. This is just how I am. And that story? It's comfortable, even when it hurts. So they stay stuck. Not because they can't change, but because they won't let go. Now let me ask you something. What part of your identity are you still holding on to that's keeping you exactly where you are? Think about it. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't building something new, it's releasing something old. Now here's where it clicks. Affirmations aren't magic, they're direction. They guide your mind toward a new identity. But you have to meet them halfway, with attention, with repetition, with patience. And yeah, it won't feel powerful every night. Some nights your mind will wander. Some nights you'll feel nothing. And that's okay, because consistency matters more than intensity. Always. Now here's the deeper truth. Your mind doesn't change because of one perfect night. It changes because of many imperfect ones. And that's where most people quit. Too early, too soon, right before things start working. Now this next part, this is where everything finally comes together. Because once your thoughts begin to calm, once your identity starts to shift, there's one final piece that determines whether this becomes your new life or just another phase you tried. And almost no one talks about it.
That final piece is what you allow your mind to return to. Not once, not twice, but consistently. Because here's the truth most people don't realize. It's not what you do one night that changes you. It's what you come back to, again and again. Especially when it's hard, especially when you don't feel like it. Because this is where most people fall off. They try something new. It feels good for a night, maybe two, Then life happens, stress comes back, old thoughts return, and they think, see, it didn't work. But that's not the truth. They just stopped before it could. Now think about this. If you spent years training your mind to overthink, to stress, to doubt, why would it change in a few nights? It won't, and it doesn't need to, because real change is quiet. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, it's subtle, almost invisible, until one day you notice something different. You fall asleep faster. You wake up lighter. Your thoughts don't spiral as much, and you realize something has shifted. Not everything, but enough. And enough is where everything begins. Now here's the part that matters most, because once you feel that shift, you have a choice. Go back to the old way, or protect the new one. And protecting it means being intentional, not perfect, intentional. You choose what you listen to before sleep. You choose what thoughts you feed. You choose whether you drift or direct. And yeah, some nights you'll slip. Some nights the old patterns will come back. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. The difference now is you notice. And awareness? That's your advantage, because once you see the pattern, you don't stay in it as long. You return faster, you recover quicker, and over time, those old patterns lose their power. Now pause for a second. If you kept doing this, just this simple shift, every night for the next 30 days, what would change? Not everything, but something. And that something would change how you feel, how you think, how you move through your life. Because better nights create better days, and better days create a better life. Now here's a quiet truth. You don't need to control your entire life. You just need to guide your mind in the moments that matter most. And right before sleep, that's one of those moments. It's a doorway between who you've been and who you're becoming. And what you carry through that doorway matters more than you think. Now let me ask you something. Which version of you are you sending into tomorrow night? The one who replays stress, or the one who chooses peace? Don't answer quickly, because that choice repeats itself every night, and repetition creates identity. Now here's the final shift. You stop seeing sleep as just rest, and you start seeing it as preparation. Preparation for the person you're becoming, because every night you're either reinforcing the old version of you or building a new one. There's no neutral, only direction. And this is where it all comes together. You don't need to force change. You don't need to chase motivation. You just need to be consistent with what you feed your mind when it's most open. And that's it. Simple, not easy, but powerful. So tonight, when you lay down and everything gets quiet, remember this moment. Remember that you have a choice, not over everything, but over what you allow to stay. And that's enough. If this stayed with you, if it made you think, even for a second, hold on to that. Don't rush past it, because small awareness leads to real change. And real change starts quietly. Just like this. Stay with it, and keep choosing a mind
that actually lets you rest. If this felt real to you, stay close to this kind of thinking. Subscribe and start creating nights that change your life.